Before Corey Mack can light the fires and smoke the tires, a team of elite engineers and master mechanics needs to build him a car that must not only produce such awesome power, but effectively convert it to speed and then make it across the finish line without disintegrating in the process. Pushing these vehicles to the ragged edge can lead to disaster. In 2006, at the Thunder Valley Nationals in Bristol, Tennessee, Corey McLenithan and the Fram team learned this lesson firsthand. In the second qualifying session, Corey lines up, hoping to secure a position by laying down his quickest elapsed time of the day. The tree turns green, and Corey launches. But in drag racing, things can change in a heartbeat.
You have those somewhat moments in your lifetime that are just like, holy, I can't believe this is gonna happen. This one's gonna hurt. I'm up over 300 miles an hour, well into our run, and the frame breaks in half behind the driver.
At 300 miles an hour, the frame is flexing in multiple directions from the 5G acceleration and 2 tons of downforce generated by the rear wing. Suddenly, it reaches its breaking point. It fractures directly behind the cockpit, triggering an emergency deployment of the parachute.
I go from looking on the track, getting ready to pull the chutes, to looking straight down. All I could see was sparks and everything else, and I knew at that point, I'm in trouble. Chute ripped the car in half, sent me into the wall backwards, and we figured about 122 G impact into the wall backwards.
Corey was extremely fortunate that he hit the wall in a way that allowed the fortified chassis of his car to protect him from the brutality of the crash. He survived basically unscathed, a testament to the strength and safety measures built into today's top fuel dragsters. In an effort to avoid this kind of catastrophe and increase performance, Schumacher Racing now fabricates many of their own components and builds their own cars at this facility in Brownsville, Indiana.
The objective is to control the cost, the delivery time, the quality, and the technology. And the more of that we can do in every critical component, the better our chances of winning those championships.
Welcome to a drag racing mechanics heaven. Covering 100,000 square feet, DSR boasts the most advanced design, manufacturing, and diagnostic equipment available. Everything you could want to build, test, and repair a top fuel or funny car dragster is within easy reach.
It does enable us to keep our quality control where we want it, as well as speed up the process when we have to do repairs or changes to our chassis.
First step, you need to build a chassis. Modern dragster chassis are built in 4 sections: the front end, front section, roll cage, and rear section.
What we'll call the rear section would be from here rearward. We have the cockpit from here to here, and we have the front section from there forward.
The chassis needs to withstand brutal forces that occur during acceleration. The engine drives so much power to the rear wheels, it's not uncommon for the front chassis section to flex about 8 inches upward.
There's a lot of forces exerted on the back half of this car. We're asking this chassis to plant thousands of pounds of downforce on the car, as well as keeping the front end down so the driver can steer it. So a certain amount of flexibility is paramount to keeping our cars together.
If the chassis material doesn't have some give, it'll snap like a twig. Enter chromoly, a material that's strong, light, and flexible. Used on aircraft hulls and engine frames, chromoly's no stranger to abuse. But on a dragster, it gets pushed to the absolute limit.
We take that tubing and bend it, cut it, shape it, weld it into a chassis. We mount the magnesium body panels over that chassis. We build all of those things here.
NHRA rules stipulate exact specifications for almost every facet of dragster construction. Total wheelbase, the distance between the front and rear axle, cannot exceed 300 inches. Weight must stay over 2,225 pounds. Since length increases stability and lightness makes for speed, staying at or within a hair of these limits is critical to race day victories.
The rules don't allow us to make big changes, so we constantly are striving to make changes that are subtle, that are allowed within the rules, that make our cars better than the competition's. When we do weld the segments together, we will allow that segment to weld and cool, and once it cools, it will shrink to where it's going to live.
Building in sections allows the welding team to more accurately control the natural welding effects of swelling and shrinkage, factors that can have a major effect on the length and shape of the car.
As we weld each of our segments, they can shrink as much as an 1/8 inch or more, and we're obviously trying to keep ours at the maximum allowed, which is 300 inches. By using the maximum wheelbase allowed, we take advantage of the entire car to make it work.
The chassis build process begins with cutting shorter sections of chromoly tubing called blanks to precise dimensions. Now, with all the blanks prepped and ready for assembly, the welding team fires up and gets to work. The two-man team must weld in perfect unison so that the chromoly tubing on both sides heats up and cools down at the same time. If the chromoly tubing cools unevenly, it could bend into an asymmetrical shape, which could weaken the frame.
Once the segments are welded, they're allowed to cool, the shrinkage and distortion takes place. The next step is to marry the sections together. The last step that we do during the construction of our chassis is to weld the rear end plates to the car to make sure that we have our shrinkage of wheelbase to a minimum.
While flexibility is critical for the front end of the car, other sections require stiffness and rigidity. The roll cage, custom fit to the driver's exact dimensions, is a great example. In the event of an accident, it must hold its shape, or the driver could be crushed on impact.
The cockpit is braced considerably more than the front half of the car. We have diagonals and uprights that really increase the strength of this area in the event of a crash. If this area becomes separated from the rest of the car, the driver still has as much protection as we can possibly offer.
To fortify critical chassis sections, welders use a technique called trussing, inserting additional bars of thicker gauge chromoly tubing in between square sections of frame. This adds significant reinforcement where it's needed.
One of the things that we utilize at DSR is a carbon fiber seat bucket. We mount this bucket in each chassis the same way, and we pour a seat for each individual driver to put him in the position that he needs to be in.
Finally, the driver's controls are mounted to the frame. A simple steering wheel, throttle, chute release, and of course, the gas and clutch pedals are all the driver needs for this kind of racing.